the haunted woods behind my dorms. I've had a few paranormal experiences in my life, but this one stands out in my mind. Also, this story is 100% true. I know it's not a groundbreaking encounter or anything like that, but it really did happen. To preface, I'm a 22-year-old male currently in my last semester of college, and this story takes place during my freshman year at that college. I go to a smaller university in Connecticut. It's located pretty much right at the base of a popular state park with a large mountain. There's a lot of Native American folklore associated with that mountain, as Native American tribes used to live there in the surrounding area. Some weird stuff's really happened there. A kid even fell to his death while hiking not too long ago, but I highly doubt that was due to anything paranormal. Behind my freshman dorm building, there was a steep hill that led into the woods. This was where everyone in our building would go to smoke. Halfway up the hill, there was a little cleared out space with a concrete wall you could sit on. After that, a much larger area at the top of the hill with trails and a bigger concrete wall. It was a nightly occasion for me and my roommates to head up to those woods and smoke a little bit. Usually, there would be other people there smoking too, so we were completely fine going up there at any time. One night, my roommate and I headed to the hill, just like we did every night. Our other roommate stayed behind because he had to study or do homework or something. I don't fully remember. We climbed the hill and went to the smaller clearing halfway up rather than the larger one. There was no one else up there, and it was a little later than we normally went, around midnight probably, but we felt safe enough to go up there at that time. Keep in mind, both of us smoked pretty regularly, so 2 bowls wasn't going to do much for us, and I'm definitely not the type to get paranoid when I'm stoned, so our sobriety was not an excuse for what happened. It was pretty windy that night, and all of the trees around us were loudly swaying. Out of nowhere, the wind completely stopped and the trees fell still. Then, the leaves on the trees that we were standing by very slowly fell to the ground, all at the same level and speed. We looked at each other and kind of nervously laughed. Suddenly, we were both filled with the sense of impending doom, like something was telling us to leave the woods immediately. I know this because my roommate told me he felt that same exact way I did. We grabbed our weed and full-fledged sprinted out of the woods and down the steep hill. As I was running down the hill, I fell backwards really hard and messed up my elbow. To be honest, it almost felt like I was yanked back by something, but there's a definite possibility I just slipped on dirt and fell, because we were flying down this hill. I picked myself up and we ran into our dorm building, slamming the door behind us. After that, my roommate refused to ever go back into those woods again. There were a few times when I went back up the hill and into those woods by myself to smoke, as I didn't feel like walking across campus. For the most part, I was fine and didn't really experience anything, but there were a few other times where I felt that same impending doom telling me to leave those woods. I haven't gone back to that area since. The Whispering Woods. I'd always been drawn to the wilderness, and there's nothing quite like a hike through the dense, quiet woods to clear your mind. But one particular trek, deep into the heart of the forest, left me with an experience I'll never forget. It was a nice autumn morning when I set out for a hike. The leaves had begun to change, painting the woods in vibrant shades of red and gold. As I hiked, I couldn't help but notice how quiet the woods were. There were no chirping birds or rustling animals, just an unsettling stillness that seemed to hang in the air. I brushed it off as a quirk of the environment, assuming that the animals were simply out of sight. After a few hours, I decided to take a break and sat down on a fallen log. That's when I first heard it, the faintest whisper, like someone speaking in hushed tones beyond my hearing. I strained my ears, trying to make out words, but it was like trying to catch the wind. I shrugged it off as the wind playing tricks on my ears and just continued to hike. But the whispers persisted, growing louder and more insistent. It was as if they were all around me, like voices murmuring incoherent words. Fear obviously began to creep, as I realized there was no one else around me. I was alone in the heart of the woods, hearing whispers. I tried to retrace my steps, but the whispers seemed to guide me deeper into the woods. I couldn't shake that feeling I was being watched, that unseen eyes were just following my every move. No matter how fast I walked, the whispers seemed like they were in my head constantly. The feeling of being watched also grew stronger. Hours seemed to pass as I stumbled through dense underbrush, trying to escape the torment of these whispers. I felt like I was on the verge of madness. Finally, I found an opening in the woods, gasping for breath and drenched in sweat. To this day, I don't know exactly what those whispers were, but what I do know is they sounded like two humans right next to me, even when I was there all alone. Dogwolf story. I'll start off by saying no, this isn't my story, but it was a crazy encounter that I've since asked each of my friends to recount their events. This happened around the year 2000. About a year after this took place, I started dating one of these friends. That's when I first heard about this Dogwolf story. I've since asked each friend, over years and miles apart, and they all remember the same encounter. Before my ex was even my boyfriend, he and our other friends were about 17 to 18 years old. At that age, I remember it being an adventure to find a place to smoke, like let's hike to so-and-so and hit something. The four of them decided to drive to Mount Pisgah, a beautiful wooded area outside of Eugene, Oregon. It's more of a hill, but it's nature in its prime for sure. I've been out there many times growing up, and I knew exactly what trail they were on. It was my boyfriend and his best friend B, and their girlfriends S and M. They'd driven in B's little white sedan, parked in the parking lot and hiking the trail next to the river where they smoked some bowls. The group spent the day out there, swimming and puffing and just being typical Oregon teens. I can imagine that hunger is what drove them to go home after a few hours. As the sun began to set, either activity alone is bound to get someone hungry, let alone doing both. So they walked along the well-worn main dirt path to the parking lot. It doesn't take but 20 minutes or so for them to get back to the little footbridge by the parking lot, and that's where they'd crossed when they'd hiked in. When they reached this small footbridge near the parking lot, B looked out into the vast field between them and the wooded mountain and noticed a huge dog. They all later described this as the biggest dog they'd ever seen. The dog was just sitting there, not looking scary, just like a humongous, friendly dog. It was about 70 yards away and starting to get dark. M's description of the dog was very shaggy and furry. My friends continued to walk across the small wooden bridge, and one of the girls screamed because the big dog was now on its hind legs, standing much closer than when they'd seen it before. It had traversed most of the large field in the seconds it took them to get across the 10-foot-long bridge. Whatever this thing was, it was fast, quiet, and stealthy. My four friends ran back to the car and they had the classic cliche "I can't get the key in" moment. At this point, the dog was standing at the very edge of the parking lot looking at them, and as my ex said, every time they looked up, he was closer, but not moving. All of them had recounted how surreal it was to see a dog standing on its hind legs. I don't know if it ran for a few ticks and then stood up again at intervals in the field, but that's the way they described it. Many times I asked them, "Are you sure it wasn't a bear?" No, it definitely was a dog standing on its hind legs. A big dog that was stalking them. Also, this is in Lane County, Oregon in the year 2000. There are few, if any, bears out there. It would be odd, but then again, I wasn't there. The kids got in the car and sped off, leaving the Pisgah dog to its own business. I've never had any reason to doubt any of their stories, and in fact, none of them really like to talk about it at all.